Right now, millions of people are working harder than ever while quietly becoming easier to replace. That is the uncomfortable reality most people do not want to confront. They believe effort alone guarantees security. They believe if they remain busy enough, disciplined enough, and persistent enough, opportunities will eventually appear naturally. But the modern world no longer rewards effort by itself. It rewards distinction. That is the difference almost everything depends on now. Two people can work equally hard, spend the same number of hours building their future, and yet end up living completely different lives. One becomes increasingly valuable. The other remains trapped in constant competition, constantly proving themselves, constantly fighting to stay relevant. And the reason has very little to do with intelligence alone. It has everything to do with rarity. Because the world does not reward what is common. It rewards what is difficult to replace. Most people never think deeply about this. They spend years doing what everyone else is doing, learning the same skills, following the same paths, consuming the same information, and repeating the same strategies as millions of others. Then they wonder why they feel invisible, why opportunities feel crowded, why their effort does not create the freedom they expected. The answer is simple. When your value looks identical to everyone around you, the world has no reason to prioritize you. That is why so many people quietly live with the fear of being replaced. They may never say it out loud, but internally they feel it. They sense that if they disappeared tomorrow, someone else could easily step into their position. Their work may be useful, but it is not distinct. And once a person realizes this, they often respond the wrong way. They work harder, longer hours, more pressure, more exhaustion, but more of what is common rarely creates uncommon results. That is the trap most people spend their entire lives inside. They increase effort without increasing distinction. And over time, this creates frustration because effort without uniqueness eventually becomes invisible. A person may be disciplined, reliable, even talented, yet still struggle to rise if what they offer can easily be duplicated by thousands of others operating the exact same way. This is why valuable people think differently. They do not ask only, "How hard can I work?" They ask, "What can I build within myself that is difficult to replace?" That question changes everything, because now the focus shifts away from competing with the crowd and toward separating from it. A person begins developing depth instead of surface-level ability. They stop chasing attention and start building substance. They stop trying to keep up with everyone else and start refining the unique way they think, solve problems, communicate, and create value. At first, this process feels slow. There is usually no immediate recognition, no applause, no dramatic reward. And that is exactly why most people quit too early. They want visible success before invisible development has finished forming. But real value is built quietly. It develops during the phase where nobody notices your discipline yet, where your growth still appears ordinary from the outside, where your improvements are too subtle for others to recognize. Yet this is precisely where separation begins. Because while most people chase fast results, the rare individual continues sharpening themselves patiently. They continue learning, refining, thinking deeper, improving their judgment, strengthening their discipline, and expanding their perspective long before the world rewards them for it. And eventually, something changes. They stop competing for opportunity. Opportunity begins searching for them. There is a principle operating beneath every economy, every industry, and every period of uncertainty that quietly determines who rises and who remains trapped in constant struggle. Most people never fully recognize it because they are too focused on surface conditions. They blame recessions, competition, bad timing, changing technology, or difficult circumstances. Yet beneath all of those things exists something deeper that shapes outcomes long before the world visibly responds. That principle is value. Not perceived value, real value, the kind that becomes difficult to replace. This distinction matters because many people confuse activity with importance. They believe being busy automatically makes them valuable. They assume effort alone guarantees advancement. and so they spend years exhausting themselves while never questioning whether what they offer actually separates them from the crowd. That is why so many hardworking individuals remain invisible, not because they lack discipline, but because discipline directed toward common ability produces common results. The world rewards what solves problems in ways that are rare, efficient, insightful, or difficult to duplicate. When a person's contribution looks identical to thousands of others, competition naturally increases. And where competition becomes crowded, value begins shrinking. This is why people often feel trapped, even while working harder than ever. They are participating in crowded spaces where replacement is easy. The harder they compete within that environment, the more exhausting life becomes. Yet they continue believing the solution is simply more effort. But more effort inside the same crowded system rarely creates freedom. It usually creates burnout. That is why valuable people think differently from the beginning. They understand something most people ignore. Security does not come from working harder than everyone else. It comes from becoming someone the world struggles to replace. Once this understanding becomes clear, the entire direction of a person's life begins changing. Instead of focusing only on external rewards, they begin focusing on internal development. They stop asking how to survive the economy and begin asking how to become valuable regardless of the economy. That shift creates power, because economic conditions constantly change, but rare ability maintains demand across conditions. Valuable individuals may still experience difficulty, but they adapt faster. Opportunities continue finding them because their usefulness extends beyond temporary circumstances. This is why some people accelerate during uncertain times while others panic. The difference is not luck alone. It is the level of internal value each person has developed before the pressure arrived. Pressure reveals value. It exposes whether a person built substance or merely comfort. And this is where most people unknowingly limit themselves. From an early age, they are taught to prioritize obedience over distinction. They learn how to follow systems, complete tasks, and meet expectations efficiently. But very few are taught how to think independently, develop unique perspective, or create uncommon contribution. So they enter adulthood, highly trained in participation, but weak in differentiation. This produces a dangerous cycle. A person learns what everyone else learns, follows what everyone else follows, builds the same skills, pursues the same opportunities, consumes the same information, then wonders why the competition feels endless, because crowded paths always create crowded outcomes. When thousands of people offer the same service in the same way, individual value naturally becomes diluted. At that point, people are no longer judged by depth or uniqueness. They are judged primarily by replaceability. And replaceability creates fear, even if unspoken. A person may appear successful externally, while privately carrying constant anxiety that someone younger, cheaper, faster, or more current could easily take their place. This fear affects confidence deeply because the individual knows internally that their value is dependent upon remaining competitive inside a crowded field rather than truly distinct within it. That is why real freedom begins when a person stops trying only to compete and begins learning how to separate. Separation does not mean isolation. It means distinction. The development of qualities, abilities, insights, and perspectives that are difficult to duplicate. This is where true value begins forming. Not through talent alone. Talent is common. Potential is common. Even ambition is common. What is rare is sustained refinement. The willingness to remain committed to growth long enough for uncommon ability to emerge. Most people never stay with anything deeply enough to become rare. They move constantly from one pursuit to another, searching for fast results and immediate recognition. The moment progress becomes slow or invisible, they lose interest. They want visible success before internal mastery has fully developed. But mastery grows quietly. That is what makes it difficult. A person may spend years refining thought, discipline, judgment, communication, skill, emotional control, and problem solving before the world fully recognizes the difference. During that period, it often appears as though nothing extraordinary is happening externally. Yet internally, Separation is forming. This is the stage most people abandon too early because external validation has not yet arrived. They interpret slow recognition as failure instead of preparation. But valuable people understand something different. The early stages of distinction are usually invisible. A seed underground does not appear impressive while it is developing roots. Yet without those unseen roots, visible growth could never survive later pressure. And the same principle applies to personal value. The strongest forms of capability are often built long before external reward appears. This is why patience becomes such an important advantage. Not passive patience, intentional patience. The willingness to continue refining yourself while results remain delayed. Very few people can do this consistently because modern culture rewards speed, attention, and instant visibility. Everyone wants rapid success, immediate proof, fast recognition. But rare value cannot be built quickly because depth requires time. This is why depth itself has become rare. Most individuals remain on the surface of everything. Surface-level learning, surface-level focus, surface-level discipline, surface-level thinking. They gather fragments of information without ever staying with one area long enough to create true distinction. And because their development remains shallow, their value remains replaceable. Depth changes that. A person who studies deeply begins seeing patterns others miss. They develop insight instead of memorization, judgment instead of reaction, precision instead of imitation. Over time, this changes the quality of their decisions, their communication, and their contribution. This is why some people carry unusual influence, even without constantly demanding attention. Their thinking has weight because it has been refined deeply over time. People trust depth. They recognize it instinctively. And trust increases value. This is one reason communication becomes such a powerful form of economic leverage. A person who can think clearly and communicate clearly multiplies the impact of everything they know. Ideas become transferable. Influence expands. Leadership emerges naturally. Most people underestimate this completely. They assume value comes only from technical skill. But many technically skilled individuals remain limited because they cannot organize thought clearly, explain ideas effectively, or influence others constructively. The world rewards applied value, not isolated ability. This is why thinking matters so much. Directed thought creates advantage. Undirected thought creates repetition. Most people spend very little time thinking deeply. They react constantly, respond constantly, consume constantly. Their attention is fragmented across endless distraction, and fragmented attention produces shallow thinking. Shallow thinking produces ordinary results. But the individual who learns how to protect focus gains enormous advantage in modern life because deep thought itself has become uncommon. Deep thought allows a person to improve systems instead of merely participating in them. They stop asking only how to complete tasks and begin asking how outcomes can be improved, simplified, strengthened, or expanded. That question separates creators from followers. Followers maintain existing systems. Creators improve them, and improvement creates value. This is why individuals who think independently often appear unusual early in life. They resist automatic conformity. They question assumptions. They notice inefficiencies others accept as normal. At first, this may create uncertainty because independent thinking separates a person from the comfort of the crowd. But long-term value rarely emerges from complete conformity. Conformity creates predictability. Predictability creates replaceability. This is one reason crowded paths become dangerous. People assume safety exists where many gather, but when everyone moves toward the same destination using the same methods, competition intensifies while distinction weakens. That is why many industries become emotionally exhausting. Too many people are competing through similarity rather than differentiation. And the more similarity increases, the more pressure individuals feel to constantly prove themselves. This creates burnout, not because they are incapable, but because they are trapped inside systems built around interchangeable contribution The solution is not necessarily abandoning your field entirely. It is bringing uncommon thinking into it. The person who approaches familiar problems differently immediately begins separating from the crowd, not because they work less, but because they think better. This distinction becomes more powerful over time. At first, the difference may appear small. A clearer insight, better organization, stronger communication, more disciplined execution, improved emotional control, more thoughtful solutions. But over years, these refinements compound into enormous separation. That is how rare ability forms. Not through dramatic transformation overnight, through consistent refinement sustained over long periods of time. This is another truth most people struggle to accept. Consistency is more valuable than intensity. Many individuals become highly motivated temporarily but cannot sustain development long enough for mastery to emerge. They seek emotional excitement instead of disciplined repetition. But valuable people continue refining themselves even when motivation disappears, because they understand something deeper. Your future value is being built long before the world recognizes it. This mindset changes how a person approaches difficulty. Instead of interpreting slow progress as failure, they interpret it as investment. Instead of needing immediate reward, they focus on accumulation. Each improvement compounds quietly. Each skill strengthens the next. Each insight deepens judgment further. Over time, a person who remains committed to refinement becomes almost unrecognizable from who they used to be. Their thinking sharpens. Their confidence stabilizes. Their communication improves. Their emotional discipline strengthens. Their judgment deepens. Their reliability becomes trusted. And eventually, opportunities begin responding differently to them. Not because the world suddenly became fairer, but because the person became more valuable. This is the shift many people fail to understand. They spend years chasing opportunities externally while neglecting the development that would naturally attract those opportunities internally. The world responds differently to people who carry uncommon value. People listen differently, trust differently, pay differently. Opportunities appear differently. Because valuable individuals reduce uncertainty. They create results consistently. They solve problems effectively. They bring clarity where confusion previously existed. That is why value always creates leverage, eventually. Not instant leverage. Earned leverage. The kind that develops slowly through repeated demonstration of uncommon contribution. And this is available to far more people than they realize. Most individuals assume distinction belongs only to extraordinary talent, but distinction is usually the product of unusual commitment rather than unusual genetics. It belongs to those willing to think deeper, stay longer, refine further, and persist after others become distracted. That persistence creates rarity, and rarity creates value. So, if you truly want to become valuable in any economy, stop focusing only on external conditions. Stop asking only how to survive uncertainty. Begin asking a more important question instead. What can I build within myself that remains valuable regardless of conditions? That question changes the trajectory of an entire life. Because economies rise and fall, industries change, technology evolves. Competition increases. But people who continuously refine rare ability remain needed in every environment. And once you understand that, you stop chasing short-term validation and begin building long-term distinction instead. There is another reason most people remain economically fragile even while working extremely hard, and it has very little to do with effort itself. The deeper problem is that many people build their lives around dependency instead of adaptability. They become dependent on one system, one source of income, one way of thinking, one skill set, one environment remaining stable forever. And when conditions inevitably change, fear immediately enters their life because their value was tied too closely to circumstances instead of internal capability. This is why valuable people focus so heavily on developing themselves instead of merely protecting their current position. Positions change. Markets change. Technology changes. But adaptable value continues surviving because it is rooted internally rather than externally. That distinction becomes more important every year. The world is moving faster than most people emotionally realize. Entire industries evolve within short periods of time. Skills that once guaranteed security become ordinary. Information spreads instantly. Competition increases globally. And in environments like this, the greatest danger is not lack of effort. It is stagnation. A person who stops developing eventually becomes vulnerable, even if they once possessed high value. This is why long-term success requires continuous refinement. Valuable people never fully assume they have arrived. They understand that relevance must be maintained through growth. But growth requires humility, and humility becomes difficult once people become comfortable. Comfort creates complacency. Complacency weakens awareness, and weakened awareness causes individuals to miss the changes happening around them until pressure forces adaptation too late. This is why disciplined self-development becomes such a powerful economic advantage. A person committed to growth notices shifts earlier. They learn faster, adapt more quickly, adjust thinking more efficiently. While others resist change emotionally, they prepare for it intentionally. That preparation creates resilience, not because uncertainty disappears, but because the individual becomes capable of responding to uncertainty instead of collapsing beneath it. This is another key difference between valuable and replaceable people. Replaceable individuals depend heavily on existing systems remaining stable. Valuable individuals develop capabilities that remain useful even while systems change. This mindset changes the way a person approaches learning itself. Most people learn reactively. They wait until pressure forces growth. A new problem appears, and only then do they begin trying to improve. But valuable people learn proactively. They study before crisis arrives. They strengthen abilities before necessity becomes urgent. That creates enormous advantage during difficult times, because preparation reduces panic. A person who continuously expands knowledge, strengthens communication, sharpens thinking, and improves emotional discipline does not experience uncertainty the same way as someone who remained passive for years. Even if both encounter difficulty, one carries far greater internal stability because they invested in development long before pressure arrived. This is why personal growth compounds economically over time. Each skill strengthens another skill. Each improvement increases future adaptability. Each layer of discipline deepens future reliability. And eventually, a person's value becomes multidimensional instead of fragile. This matters because fragile value disappears quickly under pressure. A person whose usefulness depends entirely on one narrow ability becomes vulnerable the moment that ability loses demand. But someone who combines clear thinking, communication, adaptability, emotional control, problem solving, leadership, and disciplined execution becomes far harder to replace. Their value extends beyond one environment. That is what creates long-term opportunity. Most people misunderstand opportunity completely. They imagine opportunity as something external that appears randomly. But opportunity often responds to preparation. It gravitates toward people capable of handling responsibility effectively. This is why valuable individuals often seem lucky. They are prepared when openings appear. Others may see only the visible moment of advancement, but they do not see the years of quiet preparation beforehand. They do not see the discipline nobody rewarded initially, the study nobody noticed, the refinement nobody applauded, the emotional control developed during difficult seasons. But all of those invisible developments eventually create visible advantage. This is one reason emotionally disciplined people become so valuable. Most individuals allow emotions to control consistency. Motivation rises and falls. Focus changes daily. Reactions intensify under stress. And because internal stability remains weak, performance becomes unreliable. But reliability itself has become rare. A person who can remain focused under pressure immediately separates from the crowd. Someone who continues executing clearly while others panic becomes extremely valuable in uncertain environments. This is why emotional control is not merely personal improvement. It is economic leverage. The world rewards individuals who reduce chaos rather than increase it. People trust calm decision makers. They trust those who remain thoughtful under pressure. They trust individuals capable of responding strategically instead of emotionally collapsing during difficulty. Trust creates opportunity, and trust grows from consistency. This is why valuable people protect their minds carefully. They understand that scattered attention weakens depth, emotional impulsiveness weakens judgment, constant distraction weakens thinking quality. So they become selective about what influences them. Selective about where attention goes. Selective about what thoughts they repeatedly reinforce. Because attention shapes development, and development shapes value. This becomes especially important in a culture built around distraction. Modern systems constantly compete for human attention because distracted people become easier to influence, easier to control, and less capable of deep refinement. Endless stimulation keeps people reactive instead of reflective. But reflection creates insight, and insight creates distinction. The person who protects mental clarity gains enormous long-term advantage because most people rarely think deeply enough to separate themselves meaningfully from the crowd. This is why solitude becomes important sometimes. Not isolation from life, isolation from noise. Periods where a person can think clearly enough to examine direction honestly, strengthen focus, and reconnect with long-term vision instead of reacting constantly to immediate pressure. Most people never spend enough uninterrupted time thinking about who they are becoming. They think constantly about survival, responsibilities, schedules, entertainment, and temporary problems, but rarely about the deeper question: what kind of person am I building through my daily habits? Yet that question determines future value more than almost anything else, because value is not built suddenly. It is accumulated gradually through repeated behavior. A person who practices discipline daily becomes disciplined. A person who sharpens communication daily becomes articulate. A person who solves problems consistently becomes trusted. A person who thinks deeply becomes insightful. And over time, identity itself changes through repetition. This is why habits matter so much economically. Most people associate habits only with productivity or health, but habits determine refinement. Daily routines shape capability. Small repeated actions compound into massive long-term differences between individuals. The problem is that most people underestimate compounding because its effects appear invisible early on. 1 hour of focused study does not seem life-changing immediately. One disciplined decision does not transform identity overnight. One thoughtful improvement appears small, but repeated consistently over years, these small refinements create enormous separation. This is how ordinary people become extraordinary, not through sudden miracles, through accumulated refinement sustained long enough for depth to emerge. And depth always becomes valuable eventually, because depth solves problems shallow people cannot solve. This is another truth worth understanding. Most people are rewarded according to the difficulty of the problems they can solve. Easy problems create little distinction because many people can handle them, but individuals capable of solving complex, emotional, organizational, strategic, or human problems become increasingly valuable because fewer people possess those abilities. That is why thinking quality matters so much. The better a person thinks, the better problems they can solve, and the better problems they solve, the more value they create. This is why valuable individuals invest heavily in expanding perspective. They read deeply, study human behavior, learn from failure, observe systems carefully. They understand that improved thinking improves decision-making, and improved decisions shape future outcomes. This creates another major difference between average and exceptional people. Average individuals react primarily to circumstances. Exceptional individuals shape circumstances through perspective. They see possibilities others miss because they train their minds differently. They notice patterns, anticipate consequences, recognize leverage, understand people, think strategically instead of impulsively. All of this increases value. Because valuable people do not merely consume systems, they improve them. This is why initiative becomes so important. Most individuals wait to be instructed constantly. They complete assigned tasks but rarely expand beyond them. Valuable people behave differently. They look for improvement opportunities voluntarily. They ask deeper questions. They take ownership instead of needing constant direction. Ownership creates leadership. And leadership multiplies value dramatically. Not leadership based on titles. Leadership based on reliability, clarity, judgment, and contribution. People naturally follow those who create stability, direction, and confidence during uncertainty. This is why internal development matters more than external appearance long term. Surface-level confidence may attract temporary attention, but substance sustains trust over time. And trust becomes one of the most valuable forms of leverage a person can possess. A trusted person receives opportunities unavailable to others. Responsibility increases. Influence expands. Freedom grows. Because people prefer giving opportunity to those who consistently demonstrate reliability and depth. This is why your reputation matters so much. Reputation is accumulated evidence of your value over time. It reflects how consistently you think, act, communicate, solve problems, and respond under pressure. Many people focus entirely on short-term outcomes while neglecting the long-term reputation their behavior is building daily. But reputation compounds. A person known for discipline, integrity, insight, emotional steadiness, and thoughtful execution becomes increasingly valuable because trust already exists before opportunity appears. That trust accelerates everything. This is another reason valuable people prioritize character development. Character stabilizes performance. Without character, talent becomes inconsistent, intelligence becomes unreliable, opportunity becomes difficult to sustain. But strong character creates durability. And durability matters enormously in uncertain economies because the world constantly removes people who cannot sustain discipline under pressure. This is why becoming valuable is ultimately an internal process first. External success simply reflects internal development accumulated over time. A person cannot sustainably create extraordinary value externally while remaining internally weak, distracted, emotionally reactive, undisciplined, and shallow in thought. Eventually, internal limitations appear externally. That is why serious individuals focus so intensely on self-mastery. Not because self-improvement sounds inspirational, because self-mastery increases capability, and capability increases value. The ability to control focus, control emotion, control discipline, control attention, control habits, control thinking. These things separate valuable individuals from replaceable ones far more than raw talent alone ever could. This is why the future belongs to people who continue refining themselves regardless of conditions. While others complain about uncertainty, they adapt. While others become distracted, they deepen focus. While others chase fast validation, they build substance quietly. And eventually, the separation becomes impossible to ignore. Because economies may change, but people who continuously strengthen rare ability remain valuable in every environment. In the end, the economy will always change. Industries will evolve. Technology will continue replacing certain tasks while creating new demands somewhere else. Competition will increase. Uncertainty will appear repeatedly throughout life. These things are unavoidable. But while most people spend their lives fearing those changes, truly valuable individuals focus on something far more powerful. They focus on becoming adaptable, disciplined, thoughtful, and difficult to replace. That is the real source of long-term security. Not comfort, not temporary success, not external stability, internal value. Because when your value exists only inside one environment, your future becomes fragile. But when your abilities are rooted in clear thinking, emotional discipline, communication, problem solving, reliability, adaptability, and continuous growth, opportunities continue finding you no matter how conditions change. That is why becoming valuable is not a short-term strategy. It is a lifelong process of refinement. A process most people abandon too early because they want immediate rewards before depth has fully formed. They want recognition before mastery, visible success before invisible development. But the individuals who eventually separate themselves from the crowd understand something different. Real value compounds quietly. The strongest forms of growth happen long before the world notices them. Your discipline develops in private. Your thinking sharpens gradually. Your communication improves through repetition. Your judgment deepens through experience. Your emotional control strengthens through difficult seasons. And although these developments may seem invisible at first, eventually they begin changing the way the world responds to you. People trust you differently, listen to you differently, respect you differently. Opportunities begin appearing differently. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you became more capable. That is the shift most people miss. They chase opportunity without developing the depth necessary to sustain it once it arrives. But opportunity without internal readiness eventually disappears. This is why self-development matters so much. It prepares you not only to reach new levels, but to remain there once you arrive. And this is available to far more people than they realize. Most individuals are not limited by lack of potential. They are limited by inconsistency, distraction, shallow thinking, fear of discomfort, and the habit of stopping before refinement becomes rare. They never stay with growth long enough for separation to emerge. But if you continue improving patiently, the gap between you and the crowd naturally widens over time. That is how uncommon lives are built. Not through luck, not through shortcuts, through sustained refinement. So, stop asking only how to survive the economy. Ask yourself something deeper. What kind of person am I becoming through the way I think, work, learn, and live every day? Because your future will largely be shaped by the answer to that question. If you become someone who thinks clearly, adapts quickly, communicates effectively, remains disciplined under pressure, solves meaningful problems, and continues growing while others remain stagnant, you will always carry value into any environment you enter. And value creates freedom, not instant freedom, earned freedom. The kind built slowly through trust, capability, consistency, and long-term self-mastery. So keep refining yourself. Keep developing depth while others chase distraction. Keep strengthening your mind while others follow the crowd. Keep building abilities that remain useful regardless of changing conditions. Because economies will rise and fall throughout your life. But people who become truly valuable never remain without opportunity for long.